is kind of a pipeline for the research in my lab over the last 25 years. When I started about 2.5 decades ago, we didn't know that much about aging. And so I chose to work in very simple organisms like yeast and worms because we could do really rapid, cheap aging experiments. We could ask which of any gene in the genome, we could look at 5,000 different genes and see which ones impact aging. And so this has been a highly valuable part of aging research, not just my lab, but many other labs. And we've come to many different genetic mutations that extend lifespan. And so the next step is say, all right, is any of this useful for mammals? Does it tell us anything about mammals? And so right now, my lab is focused largely on mouse aging experiments. The average lifespan of a mouse is about 30 months, so these are very long, expensive experiments, but they're essential to see if things work in mammals. I have about 1,500 cages of mice in my laboratory, and it costs me about $30,000 a month just to pay for the mouse costs. So mostly I sit around begging for money to do these experiments. Other people are looking at primates or dogs, which are very interesting experiments as well. But now we know a number of things that work in mice. And so I think the next step is to take these interventions and test them in humans. How do we do that? Well, one way we can do is try to treat early stage disease. Take people that have pre-frailty, early mild cognitive impairment, and see if we can target aging and slow the progression or reverse the progression of these diseases. The other way, which I think is more exciting at the moment, is to take healthy people, give them interventions, and see if we can slow biomarkers of aging. One of the great discoveries in the last 5 years has been that we now have good candidate biomarkers of aging. And so we can test which interventions slow it or change the rate of which biomarkers. Ultimately, once we get success here, we need to figure out ways to implement this in society. And so we're not to that point yet, but it's worth beginning to think about it. So, surprisingly, we have a lot of potential lifespan interventions already. Behaviorally, we've known that calorie restriction extends lifespan for over 8 decades. What's calorie restriction? So you can think of it as reducing the caloric input down to levels that are just above malnutrition. Animals get everything they need, but no excess. An easy experiment to do in a mouse. It's not so easy to do that in a human. But it works quite well to extend lifespan. I think I have a slide showing that. This is calorie restriction in rats. I'm sorry, this experiment's in mice, I apologize. And you can see that the blue line are the mice that get to eat whatever they want, and the green line are the mice that eat 60% of what the blue mice eat. And they have a lifespan extension of 30%, both for median and maximum lifespan. A really big effect. And most of the data suggests that these animals are much healthier longer too. Their health span is extended. Exercise. There's already good data in humans that exercise extends median life expectancy. It's more debatable whether it affects maximum lifespan. There's a lot of research now on intermittent fasting, and it has similar effects to calorie restriction, and this might be better in terms of getting humans to try it, because diets like the 5-2 diet, where you eat normally for 5 days and then fast for 2 days, another diet, you eat all of your food within 12 hours each day. There are fasting mimicking diets that you can buy now to eat that give you lots of bulk and something to eat with very low calories. All of these are showing a lot of promise, and these are probably much safer to try than calorie restriction. And then this one I put on here because it's very clear that low to moderate consumption of alcohol extends lifespan. This has been done in over 30 different studies around the world, mostly in the West, but also even in Japan, where it shows that 1 to 2 drinks a day is associated with lower mortality. No one really knows the mechanism for this. It's something that we're trying now at the lab. We're giving the mice small amounts of alcohol and seeing if we can make them live longer. It's an interesting experiment. I don't have the results yet. And then there are a number of small molecules. I'll just show you a little bit more of this data. This is, I mentioned that calorie restriction extends lifespan, but I think that there's more data to be gained by looking at specific kinds of nutrients. So this is something we noticed from human studies, and this is a complicated graph, but I'll explain what it means. Basically, we assessed what people were eating and then looked at their mortality always think what's better for one person may be different from what's best for somebody else. And there's a temporal component too. What's good early in life may be not so good later in life. And so a lot more research needs to be done. Here's the exercise data. This is the Stanford Runners study. And I just put this up because of it's such a big effect. First of all, this curve starts at 100% survival and only goes down to 60%. These are people in their 50s that were the runners. They run a moderate amount. I think it's 3 times a week for up to 30 minutes each run or more. This striking effect. 80-some% of these people are still alive 20 years later, whereas only 65% of the people that don't run are alive. I don't think there's anything magical about running. I think it's finding sustainable ways to get cardiovascular exercise, and that's very beneficial for survival. This is the alcohol data. This is a meta-analysis of 34 different studies. Here's mortality rate for people who don't drink. Here's mortality rate for 1 drink a day for men, 2 drinks a day. Even at 3 drinks a day, it's still better than nothing. You have to drink 4 drinks a day to get back to 0. We have no idea why this works, I think. There's certainly a benefit to cardiovascular health, but we don't think that's the whole story. So I don't want to encourage anyone to go out and drink, but it's a striking observation. If you look at drugs, there are a number of different drugs that have impact on aging as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about rapamycin and metformin. NSAIDs are like aspirin, ibuprofen. And mouse studies and some human data suggest that that's beneficial for aging. Acarbose is another diabetes drug like metformin that people are studying. In mice, it extends the lifespan of male mice by 25%. For some strange reason, it has no effect on females. I don't really understand why. And these are SIRT2 inactivating compounds like resveratrol, which I won't talk about, but I'm happy to answer questions. Let's look at rapamycin. So here's a dose-response curve in mice with rapamycin, low, medium, and high dose. And actually, even at the highest dose had the longest effect on survival. 20% extension in males and 30% extension in females. That's a really big effect for one drug in mice. And it may get even higher if you dose higher doses of it. So there's a lot of interest right now in this drug rapamycin. Why is everybody not taking it? Well, let me back up. Well, I'll go ahead to that slide. Because there's some side effects and toxicity associated with rapamycin. There's metabolism, altered glucose tolerance, insulin resistance, lipid dysregulation, and a whole range of side effects that people in clinical trials that take rapamycin get. This drug's approved for kidney disease and some rare forms of cancer, so we know a lot about its side effects. Actually, though, I think that there are going to be ways to dose this drug which have very little side effects and give a lot of benefits. I'll just point out that for a drug that we expect to target aging, what we would predict is it prevents or is useful in treatment for a whole range of age-related diseases. And rapamycin fits that bill. It's already clinically approved for some forms of cancer. It's already clinically used in some contexts for heart disease. In mice, it prevents Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease. It's beneficial to prevent strokes. And it has a complex relationship with type 2 diabetes, but it's beneficial in some ways. So this is the kind of thing we would expect in a drug that targets aging. It's useful against a whole range of age-related diseases. So even though it has side effects, Novartis did a clinical trial with a version of rapamycin called everolimus in healthy people over the age of 65. And they chose to look at a phenotype of aging called immune senescence. Your immune system loses its ability to respond to challenges as you get older. So we give people flu shots as they get old, but they don't mount the response to the influenza vaccine that a young person would, and so it's not as efficacious. So the idea was if you could give rapamycin or a derivative to people over 65, would it improve their response to influenza vaccine? And they found striking results. They made it simple. They did a low, medium, and a high dose of the drug for 6 weeks, and then 2 weeks later they gave influenza vaccine, and then they measured the response. At the high dose, they saw side effects, but at the low and medium dose, they saw no side effects above background. And at all 3 doses, they saw an improved immune response, suggesting they were reversing this immune senescent phenotype. They also saw some surprising improvements to response to other types of virus as well. So this is suggestive that rapalogs may be very beneficial for aging in humans, and there are more testing that's being done now. There are also trials in dogs that are very interesting. These are actually my kids about 15 years ago, and these are my dogs. And the reason I show this is there's some real benefits to doing studies in dogs that are different from mice. Mice live in a pathogen-free facility that is highly controlled. The temperature is controlled. We control what viruses get in there, bacteria, everything. And so there's a lot of concern that what you find in mice might not translate to humans. But the dogs, the companion animals, they live in your house. They eat your food. They shouldn't be eating your food, but they eat your food. A lot of them sleep in your bed. They're exposed to the same environment that people are. And so tests in dogs are very intriguing, I think, with respect to aging. And so also we know that there's a lot of conservation in aging pathways with humans. It's been known for a long time that people that are smaller live longer than people that are bigger. And that's linked to the same gene, IGF-1, that controls aging and size in dogs. So this dog here has very low levels of IGF-1, and this Great Dane has very high levels of IGF-1. This animal can expect to live about 14 to 15 years. This guy is lucky if he gets to 8 or 9. So the same genes that impact aging in humans are impacting aging in dogs. So that's led one of my colleagues, Matt Kaberlein, to start a dog aging project. The idea is to use larger breeds of dogs that are already late middle age, dose with rapamycin, and then follow health span parameters and survival for 3 to 5 years. And the prediction is these treated animals will live longer and be healthier than the untreated animals. And actually, this is about a year old. I don't know if they're still signing people up, but you can go and enroll your dog at dogagingproject.com if you're interested in doing it. This is another drug that's very exciting with respect to aging. It's called metformin. Millions of people take metformin. People that have hyperglycemia or prediabetes are often prescribed this drug. It's FDA approved. It's also used for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It suppresses glucose production in the liver. It enhances peripheral glucose uptake. And it's an extremely safe drug. Now we know that in worms and flies and mice it extends lifespan, although the effects are very small. The more interesting study is this one in humans, which I hope you can see. So these were diabetes researchers, and they were curious about 2 different drugs that were given for diabetes. One is metformin, and the other is sulfonylureas, which is a different class of drugs. Now we know that people with diabetes have about an 8-year reduced life expectancy compared to people that don't have diabetes. And so they wanted to compare the mortality effects of the 2 different drugs. The problem is this is a retrospective study. They're looking back in time 5 years from records from doctors' offices. And so they didn't know what the control population should be. So they chose, for controls, people that went to the same doctor's offices but didn't have diabetes. And those are the black and the red curve. And now we would expect the mortality rate to drop very dramatically, and that's what happened with the people taking the diabetic patients taking sulfonylureas. The striking thing, though, was that the metformin patients had a lower mortality rate than the people that didn't have diabetes. And there are many potential explanations for this, but I think the one that people are trusting most right now is the idea that the reason this happens is that metformin doesn't just protect against diabetes, it protects against a whole range of other diseases of aging at the same time. And it's actually lowering mortality. So that's led one of my collaborators, Nir Barzilai at Albert Einstein in New York, to test the first health span trial. So what they're going to do is give metformin to people in their 60s for 3 to 5 years and see if they can protect against multiple morbidities simultaneously and extend health span. This is an exciting trial. It's one way to go that I think is very interesting. The problem is that this involves about 3,000 to 5,000 patients. It lasts 5 years, and it's going to cost about $30 to $60 million. So maybe it's the gold standard for testing aging, but it's too expensive to to test many different interventions, which is what we want to do. Okay, so what are we going to do at the Center for Healthy Aging in Singapore? Well, this is sort of the list of different activities we're going to have. We're going to do great basic research on aging, but we're also going to focus on clinical studies to validate biomarkers and interventions to extend health span. We're working with the government to think about how to take these strategies and adopt them in the community to try to impact as many people as possible. Education, and we're also very open to public-private partnerships, so academic partnerships with private companies that are interested in slowing aging. And there are many of those in Russia. But the main goal is to extend human health span in Singapore, and if I were going to narrow down what we want to do, identify and de-risk interventions. That means we want to start testing these interventions in humans. And we want to develop implementation plans. So this is going to be an exciting time to go forward and see what we can achieve. Let me just restate the goal in a little bit different way to try to hammer home the point. So if you imagine this is your lifespan, you're born, you're healthy for a long time, but then you start to get sick. And then things slowly get worse until a point where you can't be tolerated and you die at some point. This really paints a bleak picture of your life. I know it's much more of you all have happy, exciting lives. I'm not trying to be negative. But if you ask young people if they want to live longer, a surprising number of young people say no. And you say, why is that? Why don't you want to live longer? And they say, well, I'm 30 years old. My grandmother's 80, and she's not in good shape. She's taking 15 pills a day. She has trouble getting out of bed in the morning. She doesn't want to eat anymore. She's in pain all day long. I don't want to live like that. And what they're imagining is that what aging research is trying to do is this red line, where you're still going to be healthy for the same amount of time, but then when you get sick, you're just going to drag out this period of morbidity and live longer. And I would argue that that's not what aging research wants to do. That's what medicine is doing right now. We do a terrible job of preventative medicine, generally, around the world. And we don't pay much attention to what's happening to you while you're still healthy. Then you get to your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and you start to get sick. And a lot of times you get really sick before we even diagnose it. And then we spend a lot of time and effort and money trying to fix your problems. And what we end up doing is not bringing you back to health, but just dragging out this period of morbidity. And so that's why the healthcare costs are going up. It's because we're not looking at the basic aging approaches. We're just trying to wait till disease happens and treat disease. I think what aging research is trying to do is through this approach, which is to extend health span. This period of healthy aging is going to be longer. You may still get sick, and at some point you're going to die, but that ratio of healthy lifespan, the total is going to go up. And then ultimately, I think we want to achieve compressed morbidity, where you're healthy for a very long period of time, and then maybe there's a rapid decline at the end. This is kind of like my 101-year-old grandmother who was still driving at the age of 93. At 94, she bowled. She loved bowling. She bowled for 60 years. At 94, she bowled a 250 game. If you know anything about bowling, I'm sure many people do. The point is that she was still highly functional late in life. And I think ultimately that's what we want to achieve. And centenarians have that already. So if you look at the kinds of studies we're doing, one is a longitudinal study in Singapore, where we're going to take over 1,000 people over the age of 90 and really try to assess what makes some people healthy and other people not healthy. This is important in Singapore because there's ethnic populations there that we don't know that much about with respect to aging, like the Malays and the Indians. There's been very few studies with respect to aging. We know more about the Han Chinese, but there's still a lot to be learned. Also, we want to take their offspring and their spouses. So their offspring should have genetic information that allows them to live longer if they're healthy people over 90. And their spouses should represent the normal population. And we want to look for these groups as people to do interventions and to see if we can slow aging. biomarkers too. You might have heard of this epigenetic clock, which looks at the methylation state of many different genes and different tissues. Different changes in metabolites with aging. This is a marker of senescence, E16, inflammatory cytokine counters, microbiome, telomere. I could go on. I think that 10 years ago we really didn't know we need molecular biomarkers, and now we have a lot of candidates. So that's a major step forward in aging research. So, you know, people always ask me, what can I do to live longer? I can't take drugs right now, or they're not approved yet, or can't get them. What can I do about my lifestyle? And this is very, it's almost what your mother told you when you think of it. Healthy diet, exercise, mindfulness. I don't care how you get to mindfulness. It's very clear, I think, that this is beneficial. Some people do yoga. Some people get it through running, Tai Chi, or meditation. I don't think the method matters. I think finding sustainable ways to reduce stress and gain a better understanding of yourself is helpful. There's a lot of data on circadian rhythms and quality sleep. People's sleep quality declines rapidly with aging, and those people that maintain sleep better, not an easy thing to do, but those people that maintain sleep better live longer. So this is a 5,000-foot view. I could spend 10 minutes talking about any of these individual things, and there's a lot of details in it that I'm not giving you today, but these are the kinds of things to think about if you don't want to take drugs and you just want to do lifestyle changes. So we hear a lot about this terrible thing, this aging that's happening. It's called the silver tsunami. And I think that's very misleading. Sure, if we do nothing, if we let chronic diseases increase in the elderly population, if we don't develop strategies to manage aging and don't develop strategies to prevent aging, we're going to have a silver tsunami. It's going to dramatically affect the economies of the world, and we're just not going to have enough working population. But if we can keep these people healthy, they offer great things to society. Older people have experience and wisdom. If we can empower them, I think they can really improve how our society functions as they get older. So the challenge is to make this not a silver tsunami, but rather a golden opportunity. And I just want to close with one thought, because I found it very interesting. I was doing a debate recently about whether people should live longer or not. And there was a philosopher saying that we live long enough. And he made the comment that one of the problems is as people get older, they get very conservative. You know, they're not willing to take risks anymore. They lose their innovation. And if we just keep people alive longer, we're going to have lots of conservative people that don't do anything innovative. And I hadn't thought of it that way before. But that's a good way to question what aging really means. Because if you assume that that's true, that people become less innovative and more conservative as they get older, why does that happen? Is that just because they live longer on Earth? I suspect that the reason that probably happens is that they probably have less neurogenesis and less increases in synaptic connections in the brain as they get older, so that their creativity may decline somewhat as they get older as a process of aging. If we can slow aging, we might have really unexpected things. We might find people stay creative and innovative much longer in life. You know, I'd love to see lots of 70-year-old entrepreneurs out there starting companies, and I think that we might find a lot of really surprising things if we can slow aging. So I'll just leave you with that thought. I think it'll be a better but also very different world if we can dramatically impact the aging process. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm really happy to take questions if anybody has anything they'd like to ask. Thank you. Progressive diseases like that, it may be that aging interventions are not that beneficial anymore. steroid diseases. These diseases that look like accelerated aging. The one that you hear a lot about is Hutchinson-Gilford disease, which are these little kids that they have a failure to grow at the age of 2. They go to the doctor's office and they get diagnosed with this disease. Their average lifespan is 13. They die of atherosclerosis-related complications, and they look like little old people. And those are very interesting people to think about with respect to accelerated aging. But there's no one disease that recapitulates every aspect of aging. So, for instance, these Hutchinson-Gilford kids, when we talk to them, they have no neurodegeneration. In fact, they're very precocious, typically. So they have some aspects of aging going on. The other interesting thing that's happened recently is we've noticed that diseases that we thought about for a long time may actually be associated with accelerated aging. A good example of that is Down syndrome. People with Down syndrome, they used to suffer mortality from complications related to their disease, but now they don't really do that anymore. They're living to 50 and 60, and they're getting early onset age-related diseases, and so that's an interesting phenomenon. Schizophrenia may be associated with accelerated aging, and there are a number of other conditions as well. So I think we have to choose carefully which ones we're going to look at to try to learn about normal age.
Thank you for your lecture. By the eye from Prямая. We together with my colleagues took a enterprise of screening medical literature on substances which reduce all-cause mortality and other horrible things among older adults. And the picture looks different. Some are completely that from my perspective. Not completely, but slightly. Some are quite clear, for example, anti-diabetic interventions, but some are partial. So could you explain your guess? First, why glucosamine reduces all-cause mortality and glucosamine. Yeah. And second, is Viagra and similar PDE5 inhibitors, they also reduce mortality dramatically in all the sick men. So what do you think, why could these two things happen?
Well, I think that glucosamine is the thing that supposedly helps replace cartilage, right? So it's taken broadly for that. It may be that it has anti-inflammatory properties. A lot of the drugs that have positive impacts on aging, particularly in men, are drugs that are anti-inflammatory. And one of the things we notice is that males and females age very differently. And it seems like in the mouse models that the interventions that reduce inflammation have a bigger impact on males. So we're really thinking about that mechanistically right now in our studies. And I missed the other drug.
Viagra. And, this anti-erectile dysfunction drugs.
I've been looking for a drug to test in myself, and I haven't decided what to do, but maybe I should try Viagra.
Seriously, the champion of mortality reduction. I don't know why.
Actually, there's someone at in Texas who was studying drugs that reduce kidney disease with aging, and they stumbled upon Cialis, which is a very similar drug to Viagra. We were looking at aged mice treated with Cialis, and they actually have a number of parameters that are associated with healthy life expectancy. No one has done a full lifespan analysis of mice yet, but we were actually thinking about doing those studies.
And in women, please.
In the female too?
Yes.
We'll do both genders.
Can I ask you a question? About алкоголь. Какова нормальная доза алкоголя?
Высокая. Нормальная доза.
Я хотел бы спросить про алкоголь. Вы сказали, 30 исследований есть на эту тему, что алкоголь полезен. В каких дозах и что могут заменить эффект употребления алкоголя?
Yeah, my question is on alcohol. You mentioned there are 30 studies on alcohol, and you said what can be a replacement for the alcohol? And the dosage. And what would be the optimum dosage? And what is a replacement if someone does not want to?
I don't know if there's a good replacement, and I'm not out there recommending people drink alcohol. Do you want to go back and translate, or sorry, I don't want to make you run back and forth.
Давайте тогда последовательно просто переведу.
Okay, you can do it.
Okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, I think that this is an empirical observation. It depends on your body weight, and so in women it tends to be somewhere between 1 and 1.5 drinks a day, and in men it's more closer to 2 drinks a day.
Ну все зависит.
What kind of drink?
Эмпирически.
Let me translate. Let her translate it, then I'll go on and answer the rest of the question.
Бокал, наверное. Данные эмпирические по дозировке. Вот. У женщин это 1,5 бокала в день. And they're asking, what do you mean by a drink? What is the
The dose equivalent would be the same. So, roughly speaking, a shot of hard alcohol is very similar to 1 glass of wine, which is similar to a big beer. Yeah.
Бокал вина, да. Drink это бокал вина. То есть у женщин 1,5 бокала вина.
There was a lot of thought that red wine might be more beneficial than other kinds of alcohol.
Некоторые утверждают, что красное вино самое полезное по сравнению со всеми другими видами алкогольных напитков.
And it's true that people that drink red wine live longer than other kinds of alcohol. But it's also true that people that drink red wine have a higher socioeconomic status than people who drink other types of alcohol.
И вот получается, что вроде бы те люди, которые пьют красное вино, предпочитают его другим видам алкоголя, они действительно живут дольше. Но здесь есть другой аспект. Те, кто выбирает красное вино, они более богаты, у них более высокий социоэкономический статус.
So when you factor that out, it actually doesn't have a benefit for red wine. And even though the people in Napa Valley, where near I live, don't like to hear this, it's probably the ethanol in alcohol that's beneficial.
Вот люди, он живет в Нapa-Вэлли, это такой винодельческий регион, и если мы аппроксимируем, уберем вот эти составляющие, то, что там богатые люди, за счет богатства они более здоровы по жизни, то получается, что красное вино на самом деле не лучше, чем любой вид, другой напитка. И получается, что этанол, в принципе, это то, что работает.
And I also want a note of caution. People that have addictive personality are better off not drinking. And also, alcohol does increase the risk of some diseases, even though it delays mortality. So it increases risk of breast cancer in women, and there's a couple other things that are associated with increased risk with alcohol. So it's a mixed bag, but overall it lowers mortality for reasons we don't know.
Ладно, consecutive last time. Вот, но я хочу вас предупредить, если вы чувствуете, что у вас быстро развиваются зависимости, лучше не начинайте пить алкоголь. И есть такой момент. Потребление алкоголя для женщин повышает вероятность развития рака груди. То есть очень осторожно.
Another question right there.
Thank you for the lecture. I believe you know Oliver Gray.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and his approach that there are 7 damages that we should remove and block, and we could stop and phase out, so eliminate aging. The question is, have ever some scientists tested several damages blocking on mice? So not one damage, but complex of them. So 2 or 3 or 4 or so Aubrey Gray personally answered for me that no. So do you plan testing complex of blocking of complex of damages on mice?
Well,
not one.
Let me answer this in this way. He, at the time, this was many years ago, picked 7 different things that needed to be corrected, and they were pretty randomly predicted. And also the problem was that some of the things he suggested to do were exceptionally hard. So So one example was to take all the genes out of the mitochondria and move them into the nucleus where they would be better protected. Well, conceptually that's not a bad idea, but experimentally that's actually harder than just stopping aging. So I think that there was some challenges to that. But let me finish. I think that Aubrey has really evolved his theory dramatically over the years, and I do events with him all the time now. His Sins is actually funding research at my lab, and I think we both have a much more similar view on how to target aging. So yes, I think it would be great to try to remove different elements of damage and see how that impacts aging. It's just that a lot of these things are very difficult to do. It may be that some of the drugs we've found are actually doing those things, but it hasn't been very easy to demonstrate that. So conceptually, I like his approach, but mechanistically, it's very hard to do some of those things. So we really don't know the answer to this question.
But the question was that there are already done. There are experiments that are already done, but they were done on single damage blocking, not the complex. So there are some damages among of these 7 damages that were researched and blocked on mice, and it didn't lead to immortality of mice.
It didn't even need the extension of lifespan in most cases.
But if we combine the experiments, just combine the experiments that were already done on one mice, so not on separate lines.
I understand.
So groups of mice.
Well, to answer that question, nobody's really done those experiments, so I can't give you an answer to that. It's not a bad idea, but a lot of those things to take out one type of damage were only partially effective, and they didn't impact lifespan on their own. We have one there and one here.
Okay, let's take the last question.
These are the kind of so these two. There? Go ahead.
Okay. На русском скажу. Психологического плана вопрос. Мы здесь все говорим о увеличении, длительности жизни. А вопрос состоит в том, какие психологические проблемы с этим последуют у нас. Все.
Associated with aging. There are a number of psychological disorders that increase with aging. Is that going to cause psychological? I don't think so, but never know. Let's do it and find out. My guess is that if we keep people healthy.
Микрофон не слышно.
Включи, пожалуйста.
My guess is that if we keep people healthy longer, they'll have reduced levels of depression with aging and probably be psychologically much more healthy, but we can't.
Извините, опять микрофон не работает. Переводчик не может перевести.
So my guess is that if we slow aging, that we'll find that people have less depression with aging, they're psychologically much healthier. But there's really no evidence either way at this point. Any more questions? He said his name.
My question is very easy. Which biomarker of aging, in your opinion, is the best?
Вы можете в микрофон говорить?
I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Нам это переведут.
In your opinion, which biomarker of aging
think that